Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Productpreneur Success Podcast. Catherine Langman here with you again. And this week on the show, we're going to have a little bit of a chat about a subject that can sometimes make people feel a little bit nervous, sometimes confused, unsure. All sorts of feelings come up with this, and that is, how do you work out how much you should be spending on advertising your online store? Now, I remember, and it's some time ago now, but I remember when I launched my first business back in 2006, 2007. I remember I was just absolutely shitting myself at the time. I was almost too scared to tell any of my family or friends that I'd started a business, or, my old boss for that matter, or even, invite them to look at my website. And, I'm sure many of you will have gone through this yourselves as well. At the time, I just had this almost overwhelming fear of failure. I had set myself a really big goal. And, what it's like when you're standing on the starting blocks, that goal can look very far away, very big, and, quite unachievable. And, one of the biggest things at the time, well, first of all, when I launched that first business, I definitely remember feeling like I needed to get everything on the website perfect, make sure, everything with fulfillment and all of that stuff was all my ducks were lined up in a row and everything was organized and ready to go, because there was this, I don't know, this unconscious expectation, I suppose, that the minute the website would go live, that all the orders would just flood in. And of course, that doesn't happen. And I should have known as well, because I do come from a career background working in ad agencies, in digital marketing agencies and things like that. So it's not like I had no experience or exposure to what really does happen. Anyway, I still made that assumption. And of course, then that didn't happen and I had to work out how to make it happen. But I do also remember, beyond that point, when I was really realizing that I was responsible for actually creating the demand for my stuff. I had to create the visibility for the brand. I had to create the consumer demand. I had to build the audience. I had to do all of those things. And, there were many different options available, as there are now. But I was especially fearful of investing my personal hard-earned savings into things like advertising, when, of course, there was no guarantee that I would make it back. Now, back then, 2007, there was no Facebook ads. There was definitely no Instagram or TikTok. There was Google ads, but mostly it was still things like print advertising and definitely email marketing. We invested in things like trade shows and expos and all sorts of stuff. So, definitely spending money. But it is a bit scary if you are at that sort of early stage and you don't know whether you'll make your money back. But here's the thing: if you want to progress, if you want to grow your business, you have to beat that fear of failure. And the way I have found to be able to do this is to detach myself from the outcome and focus on the process. And part of that understanding and that approach has come from life experience and lots of, good advice from mentors along the way. It's also come from watching my boys swimming with their competitive swimming, because, they do have incredibly big goals there. But if they just focused on that all the time, they'd give up, I'm sure, because it's so huge. And so they literally just have to focus on following the black line at the bottom of the pool and just, putting the hours in, putting the training in, focusing on, improving all of their skills and fitness and all that kind of stuff. And it really is the same in business. You want to be able to focus on mastering the process of doing business and the process of sales and marketing and advertising, and without attaching your ego or your self-worth to the outcome. And honestly, when you do this, when you're able to do this, it really does liberate you and enable you to just learn what you're doing. And I'll tell you one other benefit from approaching your advertising in particular and your marketing in particular in this way, is that you stop going into things with, solid attachments as to what is or isn't going to work. Because I tell you what, I'm constantly surprised that I might have a personal preference for this image or this ad copy or this whatever element of the marketing. I might personally prefer that, but then when I test it, it often isn't the one that the majority responds to. So, really detaching yourself from all of those specifics and just focus on the process. It's very liberating, and somewhat ironically is also the fastest way to actually get the best results versus trying to control for all the possible outcomes before you even implement anything or everything. And I definitely know many people who really try very hard to operate like that. All of you type A perfectionists out there, you know who I'm talking to. I always call myself the recovering perfectionist, but there we go. So we're going to explore we're going to talk about, ad spend and figuring out how to actually figure out, for yourself, how much you should be spending on your ads. Now, we're talking about for e-commerce businesses here. So I'm really talking mostly about your digital advertising. I will say, there's certainly other things that you can and probably should spend your money on for your marketing, but you can also analyze the results that you get from those other things in a similar way. So I'll, if I get to a relevant moment during the episode, I will mention some ideas there. So, just as I've just spoken about in the introduction here, there are those common fears and uncertainties around spending on ads, especially if you are an early stage business. But we also really do need to find that right balance between spending, being smart about it, of course, but spending and investing in your growth versus, doing all the free things. Now, I definitely don't think that we should only grow by spending money on ads. I don't think that's smart either. But if we are only trying to do everything for free, then we're going to very much hamstring and limit our growth. So we really want to be able to get smart with our budgeting and smart with, devoting and investing money to your growth, to, scaling up your traffic and sales to your website, and also, how to work out what those budgets should be based on your revenue goals and your growth projections. So hopefully I can simplify this a little bit for you as we go. Now, before we really dive into the meat and potatoes of this episode, there are a few other relevant episodes that I want to draw your attention to. One of them I actually recorded a couple of years ago, but it's not actually dependent on, what's the latest, greatest thing that works in marketing right here and now. So this one would be still relevant for listeners now, and it's called what to spend on your marketing at each stage of your business journey. And I'm really talking about, where you should be putting your investments, your marketing investment from startup or even pre-launch all the way through to when you're at scale. And so if you want to give that one a listen, it's episode 80. So you can head to katherinelangman.com/episode -80 for 80. Another one that was a little bit more recent, but also kind of relevant here, and that is how to become a cash flow queen. Sorry, blokes, you can listen to it too. It's all good stuff. That was very rude of me. I shouldn't have said that. How to become a cash flow queen. Talk about, in that episode, I talk about making sure that you actually include some margin in your pricing to account for advertising as a cost of sale. Now, many of you will have profit margins, gross profit margins from your cost of goods to your retail price at different levels. Some of you can choose how to price because it's your business, your brand, you're manufacturing the products, all of that kind of stuff. If you're a retailer and you're selling other people's products, you probably don't have as much control over that margin or that retail price. And so if that's your case, then, you definitely will need to be tempering your ad spend a little bit more versus those of you who have the bigger margins because you're manufacturers. You can invest more in your ads and scale bigger and faster. However, that particular episode, what I talk about is how a lot of people will start up their business and they'll pick and choose their pricing based on kind of the wrong things. They base it on whether things like cost plus a margin, or they might base it on what they see other people selling similar products for, and not really think about all of the costs and expenses as well as profit that you want to actually fit into that retail price. And what often happens, especially if you're working with an old-fashioned accountant, is that they will put advertising as an expense. And yes, it is an expense. However, it should be viewed as a cost of sale, because in an e-commerce business, you are generally always going to need to advertise in order to build audiences, in order to drive traffic to your website, and in order to actually make any kind of money at all. Therefore, we should be accounting for and budgeting for a portion of advertising in order to acquire your customers, right? So that customer acquisition cost or advertising cost ought to be built into your margin as a cost of sale. So go and give that one a listen as well. katherinelangman.com/episode-165 for 165. Any past episodes that I mentioned in this episode, I will, of course, link to in the podcast show notes page. All right, so how do we actually figure out what our budget should be for ads? And so where you want to start is looking, well, first of all, you want to look back. You want to look back if you have history, that is, of course. If you are at the starting line, you just have to estimate forwards. But if you've got sales history, then you can look back and you can see what you were making revenue-wise month on month, and look for patterns in your sales history. And then you can look forward and project how much growth you want to achieve over the coming year. When you're looking back and you're looking at your sales history and patterns and sales cycles, you'll see ups and downs, but you also need to think about what might have caused those fluctuations in your historic sales, because some of those fluctuations might be because you ran out of your most popular product and you were out of stock of it for a few weeks, and then you probably see when it came back in stock, then sales shoot up. So we don't want to repeat those patterns. But if there are other patterns where your sales are influenced by consumer demand or because of the seasons, we have a couple of clients who have seasonal businesses. One brand is a summer-related brand, another one is a winter-related brand. So it's kind of unrealistic to suggest that they're going to suddenly have very even sales month on month throughout the year, unless, of course, they're in a position where they can start selling in the opposite hemisphere where the seasons are flipped. So you want to really think historically, think carefully about your historic sales cycle, so that when you are projecting forward and setting your sales targets month on month, you can set a growth target comparing, the future month to the same month the previous year, rather than the previous calendar month, because again, that just often doesn't make sense. So you want to then set some targets moving forwards for how much you want to make over the coming year. And then what you want to be doing is based off your conversion rate on your website and based off your average order value, you can figure out how much traffic you actually need to get to your website in order to achieve those goals, right? So it's a fairly simple mathematical calculation there. And once you have that calculation done, then you can actually start thinking, okay, well, how much of that is going to come from my paid traffic? If you've listened to any of my episodes or read much of my content before, you'll know that I'm never going to advocate that 100% of your traffic should come from paid ads. That's never going to be profitable. But you are likely to need, most of us really do need to have some of our traffic and sales coming from paid traffic. And in reality, if you're running an online business, and like an e-commerce business is, that paid traffic is going to be the element that you have the most control over when you want to scale and grow, because you spend more and you make more, right? It's like turning on a tap and more comes out the other end, right? You can't have that much control over the free sorts of options, like it takes a little while for your SEO, search engine optimization, to really bear fruit with traffic and sales. And if you do things like working with influencers, you'll often see a nice big hit, but it'll be short-lived, and you can't sort of just turn that tap on and it will just, flow through or be consistent and stable over time. That just isn't how it works. Equally, my absolute favorite source of traffic and sales being your own database, preferably Klaviyo. That is going to be a small list when you start out in business. And even when you're a large business, if you're not actually proactively driving traffic to your website, then that list won't keep growing. And if the list doesn't keep growing, then, you'll be marketing to the same people all the time, and that list will then burn out. So you do need to have some paid traffic in as part of the mix, right? But how much of it? So I would be suggesting, if you are early stage business, then you're probably going to expect a much bigger proportion of your traffic is going to come from paid. But ultimately, once you really get into the swing of things, you've got multiple kind of channels, from owned, like your email database, and earned, like your organic free traffic and referrals and all of that kind of stuff, as well as your paid. Ultimately, you want to be, sitting somewhere around 15% of your revenue coming from your paid channels. Now, it'll take a little while to get there. So if you're earlier stage, it might be much more than that. So at the end of the day, you've got to work out like how much of your revenue, how much of your traffic needs to come from paid, and then you can start figuring out the budgets for your ads. Now, in the next couple of weeks, it's probably going to be next week that I'll be announcing my upcoming free 3-day e-commerce growth bootcamp. And so as soon as those details are ready and all the links, I'll share them with you, because there will be a really cool calculator tool that is going to help you to figure all of this out for you. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be really cool. Now, once you have worked out that budget, then of course, and like this episode, we're not going to talk really about setting up ads or writing or designing your ads or all of that good stuff. You can check out some past episodes about that, or some of my blogs. But when you are running some ads, then you don't want to just set and forget, right? You do need to be making sure that you are getting the best return on investment, essentially, to your ads, right? So you don't want to just turn ads on and just leave them to run. I had this case, this is a few years ago now. One of my students in my program did that, and she, I know she felt awful when she realized that that's what she'd done, but she'd let them run for quite a long time without looking at them, and she really then freaked out and worried that she'd wasted all of that money. I mean, the good news was that she'd actually made money from them. She could have made a lot more had she been, reviewing them and optimizing them, and really understanding the results. But at least she didn't lose money. So you don't want to do that, right? Like, that's very, very risky, especially in this day and age where ad costs definitely are more expensive. So you want to, what you might call, follow the money trail. So you really want to be able to analyze your results. And again, I do have past episodes where I dive into this in a lot more detail, but you want to be analyzing your results. So that means, so if we take Meta advertising as an example here, you want to be reviewing, how many people are actually getting to your website, and what's the cost for them to get to your website? How many people are adding to cart? How many people are actually checking out and placing an order? What is their average order value? And, what is the cost per purchase there? So how much are you spending in ad spend in order to get the order, is what I'm saying. And then, of course, what is the revenue that you're making from the ads, and the return on ad spend, ROAS. So there's no hard and fast rule with what that should be specifically. There are what I would say some cha-ching moments where you can actually improve the returns that you get. And this is where it's going to refer back to, like I said earlier, if you have a bigger gross profit margin, then you can spend a little bit more on your ads versus those of you who perhaps are retailing other people's brands and have slightly smaller margins, then, you know, obviously you don't want to go to town. But the other thing that's super important here is your customer lifetime value, where, you know, this will really also help you with your budgeting about how much you can spend or should spend. So if you think about it, if you're selling a product that somebody is only ever going to buy once, then you can't spend as much on your ads as somebody who might be selling, like, let's say, for example, skincare. By and large, most people will use up their skincare, you know, their cleanser and their moisturizer, etc. They'll use it up and then they need to buy more. And so when you understand that total customer lifetime value, or you might like to look at it over a 12-month period, then, you know, all of a sudden the total return on that ad spend becomes incredibly profitable, right? So you might make a conscious decision to decide, okay, well, I'm prepared to spend a little bit more to acquire that customer the first time because I know I'm going to make it up on those repeat purchases. And then, of course, you can start looking at it from the other angle and decide, okay, well, so far, this, you know, I've got customers who are worth this much to me in a year. They buy 4 times in a year, or maybe they buy 3 times in a year. But I reckon if I do XYZ, I can speed up that time from first purchase to repeat purchase and ultimately encourage them to buy 4 times in a year instead of 3 times in a year, and then, you know, obviously increase their value by 25%. So, and you can do things by, like, introducing some new products to your range, or you know, putting other bundles together, or, you know, there's various different things that you can do. Obviously, you have to have good products if you want people to keep buying them again. And, you know, you can do those things even if you currently only have a product that people will buy once. There's nothing stopping you from introducing something else to your range that will encourage a repeat order. So ultimately, you know, it is looking at these results and metrics and understanding what that means for you specifically, as well as starting to have some ideas for how you might be able to improve the return on ad spend by, you know, optimizing and tweaking and manipulating these various different pieces of the puzzle. I want to refer you here to a couple of past podcast episodes that are super relevant if you really want to dive more into the metrics and how you can understand them better, how you can actually improve your return on investments, all of that kind of stuff. So the first episode I want to refer you back to is one called, helpfully, How to Improve the Profitability of Your Social Media Advertising. And in that episode, I do actually talk about some of the, you know, the actual ad content and setup processes. So if you want to listen to that one, that's episode 173. So kathrynlangman.com/episode-173. And then the one directly after that is actually called Make Millions with Magic Metrics. And so in that one, I dive a lot into all of the other metrics that an e-commerce business would be or should be measuring in your business. And so this is not necessarily ad specific, but of course it all impacts the results and the profitability of your ads. So that one, that's a super popular episode. If you haven't listened to it yet, head to kathrynlangman.com/episode-174. Again, I'll include those links on the show notes page for this episode. Now, the next thing I just wanted to talk about as well is that, you know, looking at the returns on your ad spend, sometimes spending more is better than spending less. And I want to talk about this in a couple of different ways, a few different ways, actually. The first is kind of harks back or refers back to the budgeting and calculating, you know, how much traffic you need to hit your growth goals and how much of that should come from paid. What I want to actually mention in relation to that is what I will see frequently with very small or early stage startup businesses. They want to really test out ads on a teeny tiny budget before they go all in, thinking that that's the smart thing to do. And I get it. That's a very logical approach. I probably did that first too. I don't even remember now. or maybe I didn't. I think my first foray into paid advertising was not digital, it was print. And so it was like a price list. You picked from the price list. You had no way to negotiate on that. Anyway, if you're only going to spend a couple of, a handful of dollars a day on your ads, you might as well not bother, because you do actually need to spend enough in order to get any kind of oxygen on the platform. And so where this comes from is understanding a little bit about how these platforms work, so the platforms, whether it's Meta, whether it's Google, it doesn't matter what platform it is, but they all have a lot of advertisers on them these days. And if you want your ads to get seen by your audience, you have to understand you're kind of going into an auction scenario. And it's not necessarily that the person who's willing to spend the most wins, although that's, that definitely comes into it a bit, because if somebody is willing to spend the most but their ads are horrific, they're not going to get approved and they won't resonate with the audience and they'll bomb. So it certainly doesn't just come down to budget, but you do actually need to give the algorithms enough budget to work with. We are relying on these AI tools, these algorithms to take our instructions and take our information, our images and our words and our instructions on what we want to, people to do with the ads. Do we want people to just watch them? Do we want people to click? Do we want them to buy? So we're giving some instructions when we're setting up the ads. We need to actually give these algorithms enough budget to work with here. If there's not enough budget there, they're not going to be able to get the ads in front of enough people for long enough to actually achieve the outcome that you're after. So if you're, like most of you, probably wanting to get people visiting your website and purchasing, that is quite a big ask. If you put yourself in the shoes of being a consumer, it is quite a big ask for you to see an ad on your news feed or on Google and literally click once to the website and buy straight away. That's a big leap in trust and to get a new person over the line that quickly to buy. So spending too little is a waste of money. Obviously, we don't want to overspend either. But the second way that I really want to talk about you might call this picking the right dance floor. This is like, where do you advertise? And, sometimes actually spending a bit more, but spending it on 2 different platforms or on a few different platforms will actually get you better, more profitable overall results. And so again, I want you to think about your own behavior online and what you do, because I see this and I do this myself all the time. People might see an ad on social media. It could be any of the social media platforms, really. And some people buy from those ads straight from social media. That's great. But a lot of people will actually see them. They might even click on them and then they go away and they think about it. They might talk to their friends. They might, do some other research, whatever. And then they go to Google and they type in the brand's name or they type in some other search query and go and buy that way. And so when you think about it, if you don't combine those different ad channels and spend a little bit of money on both, then you're missing out, right? So if you're not doing that awareness building, that demand building type of advertising first, you will have fewer people Googling for your stuff on Google. But if you don't do the Google advertising in combination with the social media advertising, then you're probably missing out on the people who are ready to buy right now. Because typically people do Google when they're ready to buy. We're well trained to do that. We know if we go to Google, then we can, there's the shopping listings up the top and, it's just a super direct way to find the products and the website to buy from. But if people don't know you exist, they're not going to be Googling for you, right? So this is why you sort of need to combine both. And ultimately, you will end up getting a better total return on ad spend by doing it that way. So what I mean by that is like, it's not like half, it's not like if you just do, say, Meta ads first and decide to add Google in later, that you'll get exactly half the results. It doesn't work like that. unfortunately. Now, I'm just using those channels as examples. They might not be the right channels for you. That is certainly something else to think about, and thinking about where your audience is hanging out and what is going to really make the most sense for, you know, who they are, what you sell, and where people go to buy. So really, you know, have a bit of a think about that. And then the other thing, like I, mentioned earlier, you don't just only rely on paid traffic. So, because that does get expensive over time. So really the two things that will help you make even better profits from your paid traffic and getting, you know, a better return on ad spend is working on some search engine optimization and other sort of free types of traffic. You know, it could be trying to improve referrals. It could be, doing some collaborations. It could be doing some traditional PR. There's a lot of, entering business awards programs as well. There's a variety of different ways that you can actually help boost the size of your audience and the visibility and awareness. Increasing the size of your audience is super, super important. And if I could pick on one thing that is probably impacting the majority of people's ads, is that the visibility is not it's not enough, right? And I would say that probably impacts me as well. I need to get better at that as well. So the free stuff, and also email marketing / email and SMS, of course. So using Klaviyo to really help improve your ad results. That works in so many different ways, but growing your email list will happen, of course, hand in hand with spending money on ads and increasing your volume of traffic to your website and all of that jazz. So you really want to make sure that you just have a system in place all the time for building that email list, of course, using some automation to convert more of your visitors into customers and repeat customers and all of that jazz as well. So those are the things that will really help enormously. And then the next thing that you really want to consider that will help you to improve your returns, your return on investment, your return on ad spend, is testing your ads. So testing and tweaking. So when it comes to testing your ads, there's a process that you can go through. In a little bit of a nutshell, you want to start testing things like the copy and the messaging angles and see what your audience responds to the best. In marketing strategy, typically, and when you think about your buyers, typically you're going to have people who are motivated either to move away from pain or towards pleasure. And ironically, even though we all think that we want to have more nice experiences and pleasure in our lives, actually we are more motivated to fix pain than to move towards pleasure, because sometimes it's the devil we know that we will stick with versus the one we don't know. So really testing those messaging angles in the copy is really, really useful. Then also testing, the visuals and how you might represent those messages in your ads. You will have some people who respond well to video. You will have some people who respond to images. You'll have some people that respond to very practical, feature-oriented images. Some people who will respond more to, the emotive angle being portrayed in the images. There's a variety of different ways that you can communicate visually, and you kind of need to test some of that stuff. You can also test what page you send the traffic to and see if there's ways that you can improve the conversion rate on that page. How can you get people to add to cart more? More adds to cart will lead to more checkouts as well. So initially just focus on increasing that add to cart rate. And also, start monitoring how what's the longevity that you get out of your ad creatives, because sometimes we have clients where the ad creators have a long lifetime and others have quite a short lifetime. You just have to have that, it's a little bit of a content creation system in place so that you can, once the results start to taper off, you've got new, fresh stuff that you can slot in. So there's, a whole different suite of options there that you can use to help consistently improve the results there. I like to be reviewing improvements on a week-on-week basis, as well as looking at things over a longer period of time as well. But just to start seeing, okay, well, did that change? Did that test increase, clicks to the website? Did it increase adds to cart? Did it increase the number of purchases, the purchase conversion value? Did it decrease the cost per purchase or cost per conversion? And what was the total return on ad spend? And so, just having a method of review that will help give you the evidence that you're improving. So remember back at the start, I said, yes, you set your big goal, but then you've got to focus on the process. This is what it means to focus on the process in regards to your ads. And, I will say that it's important here not to be really emotionally attached to any of these elements, certainly not emotionally attached or wedded to any of the, the ad creatives or images. It's like, if something just really doesn't work, or if a promotion doesn't work, whatever it is, don't stress about it. Just learn from it and go, okay, what can we do, that will do better next time? So, pivoting gracefully might be the way to put it. And also just remaining flexible as well. It is super important to remain flexible with your approach to advertising, but also a little bit flexible with your ad spend. So if things are really going great guns, put some more money into it. If that starts to taper off, you pare it back. If there's a really great opportunity to jump into another channel, go for it. And just try and keep that kind of positive, flexible approach and mindset to all of this stuff. So that, my fabulous e-commerce friends, wraps up another dose of the Productpreneur Success podcast. So I hope that you've enjoyed that, and hopefully you're a little bit inspired to review your ad budgets, or perhaps consider them in a different light. Perhaps you're all a little bit excited about my upcoming e-commerce growth boot camp that I'm going to be running. So it'll be a 3-day event coming up in late August. So stay tuned. I will share that detail with you very, very soon. At the end of the day, remember, advertising to build your business, it's not all about dollars and cents and ROAS and all of that kind of stuff. It is also about being creative. It's also about being passionate about connecting with your audience, and just kind of the bigger message that you're trying to share with your audience, being bold to try new moves, all of that good stuff, right? Now, I know it is pretty hard to do all of that for ourselves. So that is where it can be helpful to work with an expert who can guide you through. If you would like to book a free e-commerce growth strategy session with us, you can do that. You don't have to wait for the upcoming bootcamp. So you can do that at katherinelangman.com/work-with-me, and you can schedule that in anytime you like. And I will, of course, share that link on the show notes page as well. That's it for today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you tune in next week, where I will be serving up way more sizzling tips and tricks to help keep your e-commerce business growing. Until then, keep dreaming, keep implementing, and hopefully keep selling those products like hotcakes. I'll catch you later. Bye for now.